Welcome, everybody, and to another session of County Talk, where things we boring but important. And as it turns out, we've had a lot of topics that we've done, and really none of them have been boring yet. So we're falling down on the boring part, but we are clearly on the important thing, and especially today, this is the time where we talk about the nitty-gritty issues of the county, things people may not know that we do, and we wanted to highlight, especially considering that April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. So I'm Sue Hansen. I'm one of your 3 elected commissioners. And I'm here with Stephanie Holsinger, who is our program manager for child welfare and adult protective services, and Rebekah Lansdown, who is the executive director for KinConnect, which is a child placement agency. So we're going to talk about some pretty important things today, not even just pretty important things, but some real important things and important to our community. So thank you for being here, and we're going to start, Stephanie, with you, and tell us a little bit about your background and how you became involved with child welfare.
All right, thank you for having us. So I have been with the county for about 15 years now, and I started as a case worker, did some casework in child welfare as well as in adult services, and kind of just rose through the ranks, and now I'm the manager for the child welfare and APS programs.
Okay. And what's one of your biggest challenges as a manager for that program?
Never enough money.
Yeah.
That the budget for child welfare is set by legislature, and sometimes that's just not enough. You can't foresee, you can't see what's going to happen. There's a lot of things that just kind of pop up.
Right, in the future, and it is really a complicated department. It's not as clear cut, and so that's another reason why we want to make sure that people can understand a little bit about what the challenges are. Budget certainly is one of them. But Rebekah, tell us a little bit about you and how you got involved with KinConnect and what you do.
Okay, so actually I started in child welfare about 15 years ago. Stephanie and I actually had a case together. I think one of our first cases was 15 years ago. And I worked for another agency for about 10 years. And Montrose County was kind of always on the forefront of doing placement with kinship families. And I didn't see that in a lot of other counties, but it was really kind of grew near and dear to my heart. And so we continued working with kinship families, and then it became a time where we weren't any longer, and I really still wanted to do that. And so I started KinConnect in 2019, and the primary focus of that was to work with kinship families, and then we still work with traditional foster homes as well, but we're really focused on how do we meet the needs of kinship families in our community.
So for those that might be watching that don't understand the difference, could you explain a little bit about what kinship means? I mean, I know what kin is, but let's talk a little bit about that.
So kinship is when the child already has a relationship. It doesn't necessarily have to be a grandparent or an aunt or uncle. It could be a school teacher. It could be a family friend. But there's some relationship that's already there for that child. And then they have found throughout the years that that's less disruptive for a child. It has less trauma involved when they're already in relationship with the person they're going to be placed with when they are put into an out-of-home placement.
So is that a preference to traditional foster homes then to have a kinship placement for a kid?
Yeah, so it has been, and like I said, Montrose County has always kind of done that. And then in 2021, it became a state rule with Families First when it was introduced and accepted by the state of Colorado. And so it's even more prevalent now than it was years ago.
So what, I mean, I think that people that are involved in the system understand it, but for those of us that haven't been involved in the system, maybe you could take us through sort of a typical case that, or maybe not typical, hopefully they're not all typical in what you're going to talk about, but explain how it works. So you get a call, and how you ultimately then work together. So Stephanie, why don't you start?
Okay.
Give us the rundown.
So there is the reporting line. Colorado has the child abuse reporting hotline, and all calls go to that call center, and then they get put into what's called our trail system. So that's our computer system. And every day we look at those referrals, and we determine whether it meets the criteria per statute. So we have to have a mistreatment, and that can be anything from sexual abuse to child neglect, medical neglect, goodness.
Emotional abuse.
Emotional abuse, thank you. It's physical abuse. So we look at those and we look at the criteria and see if it meets. If it meets criteria, then we screen that referral in. And depending on the severity of the information, it could be an immediate response, it could be 3 calendar days, or 5 business days response.
Okay, so just to further clarify, so I see something I'm concerned about. I could call into the hotline if I were concerned about a child. I think it's important for people to know that this is all. But you said statute. Not everybody understands what that is, but by law, we have to. What determines abuse is written in the law. Is that correct?
That's correct. The government doesn't have the right to interfere in a family without a very specific reason. So it has to meet criteria to have the response from child welfare or really any government agency.
Right, and I think there's also some frustration when someone thinks something should be done, but it doesn't quite meet the letter of the law, and gets frustrated with us, for instance, that we can't intervene. So then the referral comes. How do you two connect? How do you KinConnect?
So if we go out and investigate and the situation cannot be safety planned, or we can't do interventions that would keep the family together, then we have to remove the child from their family of origin. And that is where it comes to, we contact the child placement agencies like KinConnect and say, do you have a home that we could place this child in? Or on kind of a similar process is we have a grandparent or maybe a next door neighbor that is willing to have the child in their home while we're working with the parents. Rebekah, can you go out and do a home study and see if we can license or certify this kinship placement so that they could get some more additional supports?
So where would the child be in the interim while you're doing a case study, for instance, or a home study to see if it's safe enough? Where would the child be?
Oftentimes we can go ahead and place with kin because we are in the process of filling out the paperwork, and especially if it's an emergency, then we get a little bit more leeway to do those background checks and fingerprints and work with the family to get certified and start the home study process.
Right, all because you want the kid to be safe, right? And so just backing up a bit, you can do a safety plan where you go in and you can determine whether it's safe enough for the kid to be there. And that can also be a part of the process, right?
Correct.
I just want people to understand you don't just snatch kids out, and there's a very heavy process that you have to follow, and it's a legal process. So
yes, we would prefer to keep families together, and we would do just about anything to keep the family together. But there are times when we just can't mitigate whatever that safety and risk is if it places the child in too high of danger.
Right.
And we don't actually have the authority to remove children. We have to get that from either law enforcement doing what's called a 72-hour hold, which is not the mental health 72-hour hold. This is strictly just placing the child in our custody, and then the judge has to continue that placement, or we go in from the judge to begin with, and the judge grants us that authority.
Ultimately, the judge decides. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so Stephanie, there's a person that comes into your care or your sphere. Tell me what happens then.
So once we receive the referral from the county, so all of our referrals have to come from counties. We cannot place children without those referrals.
Okay.
And so once we receive that, we go out and we meet with the family, and then we start the process for certification if they choose to certify. Some families don't, and then we're just doing a home study on that family, which can be used later, typically if there is an adoption or if they need it for an APR or something. But we do that process. It depends on the family, on how quickly they get through it. We've went anywhere from 5 weeks to 3 months.
Oh, wow. So it can take a while.
It depends, yeah. It definitely depends on the family and how quickly they're able to get through it, because it's a lot of work to do it. But it's worth it in the end, because it's not only do they receive the support, but they receive in-home supports. We'll set families up with, some therapy type services. We'll set them up with solutions or things that will wrap around them, services that wrap around them, especially for our grandparents.
So a grandparent might need some support. And, I mean, they haven't had a little kiddo in their house for a long time, so they might need some help with that.
They'll need some in-home supports, maybe some more training, possibly some therapy themselves. And so we'll work with them on finding out what their needs are so that they can best support the child in their home.
And then do you stay with that family for a
We
while?
do.
And how long, the average length of stay would that be?
So we'll stay with that family for the duration of the case.
Okay.
And so until that case closes or they go in, an APR or to an adoption or a reunification, we're always happy to see reunifications. We'll be with that family for that entire time. And then we'll have some families that will have came on as a kinship family and they'll decide to continue and do traditional foster care for us.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to know that unification does happen. It's not that you're, that kids don't have an opportunity to go back home. So parents can go through some of the processes that they need to go through and then can reestablish a healthy home for their children and have them back.
Right, and that's a huge part of that process while the children are in care is trying to make sure that they maintain really healthy connections between the kinship family and their bio parents so that relationship and supports can continue after the returned home.
Now, you started this business, right? I mean,
Yes.
this is so you were that passionate about it.
Yes.
So having people that had a connection with the kid was important enough to do this. So how many homes do you have, and how does that work?
Oh, boy. So over the last 5 years, we've certified over 100 homes.
In Montrose County, or
In Montrose, Delta, San Miguel,
Okay.
and Mesa.
in our region?
In our
Okay.
region,
Okay.
yeah. And currently, today, we're, I want to say 45, between 45 and 50. We have a couple that are in process, so, but we are at 77 children in care.
Wow, that seems like a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
Our numbers have tripled.
So can you give us a little of the data that you're seeing that increases in out-of-home placements? What do the numbers look like over the last year or so, or do you keep it that? Is it right here?
I do keep that. So in 2022, we served 71 children. And then in 2023, we saw a huge increase to 146.
Oh my gosh, almost double. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and we're set already to probably double that again this year.
Interesting. So I guess I'm curious as to how many of the homes that are or the cases are drug involved. Is there a crossover with addiction in that sense? So so it makes it really, is it a high percentage of correlation, would you say?
I would say at least 95% of our cases are drug related, and the other 5% could be strictly just a mental health without the co-occurrence of the substance use, or maybe lack of understanding, just not having the education about how to be a parent.
Right.
And that's a lot of generational abuse cases that we see.
Sure, and I mean, I'm concerned about that high correlation with the addiction and drug abuse because that, I mean, obviously we have more and more lenient drug laws that kind of keep that, that don't help that situation at all. So,
Right. And I'd see that across the board with
Yeah.
all of our cases as well.
yeah.
It's 95% at least.
90, okay, that's that's kind of startling, isn't it? So,
Yes.
I know the work that you two do is difficult, and it's hard when you have a kid that when you see the home kind of dismantling, which is kind of brings us to, I think you have some resources here for people that if they wanted to touch base or call or had any questions, you're available. This is on our county website, so. So people are free to touch base and ask questions if they need to about what that means.
Absolutely.
Or if I was interested in being a kin, I mean, if I had someone, I could do that. You'd come in and do a home study on me and see whether I was fit.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're always happy if people just have questions, we'll go out and I say a lot of the times that's me. I'll go out and just meet with them just to answer questions.
Yeah, and I'm sure you get a feel for people when you first meet them.
Right.
So traditional foster home, how I normally think of foster care, is very different from having maybe a grandma or someone that is a relative or a close friend taking care of. How does that working, and is that declining and kinship is increasing in terms of how many homes we have, or where are we at with how many homes we need?
We need a lot more.
Okay.
We are really lacking with traditional foster homes, and it has been declining. I've watched a decline in traditional foster homes really in the last 4 years. There's been a huge decrease in people's interest. And we always have it's kind of a odd situation where a lot of people come on because they would like to help, or they have a primary goal, and that goal doesn't always align with foster care itself. We really need homes for teenagers, and we really need homes for large sibling groups. But a lot of people want to foster babies.
Right.
And that's not really the biggest need that we have right now. It's really for older children. There's a lot of children just kind of hanging out, and they have nowhere to call home. So that's really the biggest need right now, is that the older kids, larger sibling groups, and probably from ages about 7 and up.
But is it hard to be a foster parent? I mean, what's kind of the perfect family that would be good for foster parenting?
I wouldn't say it's hard. I mean, I've been a foster parent, so yes, in some sense it is, because there's a lot of demands on you as a foster parent. You have to do a lot of visitations and appointments and things like that, but at the same time, it's very rewarding. All of the cases that we had were reunifications, and
Nice.
so that was super rewarding at the end of the day. And really, anybody that just has a desire to help can be a foster parent. You do not have to be married. You do not have to, have a huge house. You just have to have space for a child and a willingness to help.
I think those people have super huge hearts that are willing to do that, and I know there are kids that are floating around that could really use a loving parent at a home like that. So we brings us to Child Abuse Prevention Month, and this is the month where we bring it to people's attention that this is a critical problem, and that even in our community, you might think everything's fine, but we still have a huge need. And I want to make sure that we underscore that we could use foster homes. That we need more foster homes, especially for those older kids. It just breaks my heart to think there are kids out there that don't have a place to call home and are couch surfing or whatever else.
Well, some of the new legislation has really tied child welfare's hands and put a barrier for some people to be be certified for foster homes or kinship homes. So we have kids that are staying in offices and hotels with caseworkers and hospitals because there's not enough placement for kiddos. And if they have a co-occurring either a behavioral health need or a substance abuse themselves, because especially a lot of the older teens do, then the facilities have all closed in the state of Colorado. And so there's just not enough beds for a lot of these youth that really need someplace safe that can provide that service, the support and the therapy and everything else that they need.
Didn't you just earlier tell me a story about the kids that were having to stay at the county office because you got inflatable mattresses so they could stay there until a placement could be found. So, and you did find placement, right? So, and they all could be together.
Yes.
So I think that would be very important too, right? Even maybe you don't like your sibling, but when push comes to shove, you want to be with your sibling, right?
Absolutely.
So, is there anything that can be done about these laws? I mean, I'm ready to go fight. What? I mean, what can we do about that? Because it really seems to defeat the purpose if you make it that difficult to become foster parents.
I think a lot of people have explained. I mean, I've been doing this for 15 years, but a lot of people explain it shifts. There's always some group that comes and they have the most money or the most lobbyists that have the ears of the Congress that create these laws, federal to state, all the way down. Right now we're just in a pendulum shift that's very much focused on, tying child welfare hands and not really putting the needs of the child first and giving a lot of leniency to kind of those barriers of, the foster families have to do so many trainings or so many to get certified. They have to do so much. It really just does need to kind of swing more to the middle where, the kids need the bigger voice. The children need to be able to express what they need and be safe and be away from the trauma. I hear a lot, that's how the kids have lived. They're used to the trauma. Well, that doesn't mean it's right.
Right.
We need to really focus more on the laws to make those changes for the children. And I think, I wish child welfare caseworkers themselves had a lobbyist that could go and listen to what we do every day and how we want to help and what we can do and what we should do and have that voice in front of Congress.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think that I think child welfare caseworkers get identified as negative, and that you're always instead of really what you're doing is trying to protect the children, and so that's your main focus. And so I think that sometimes it gets distorted that you're trying to do mean things, and that is not the case. I mean, I don't think that we'd have how many caseworkers doing 12-hour shifts watching 4 children in our offices if they didn't, love their job and weren't passionate about what they do and it meant something. So, well, I'm hoping the pendulum sways back the other way so that we can start looking at reasonable, practical ways to take care of kids as opposed to always embracing a certain perspective. So maybe we can work on that. But it is we're highlighting the month, and I think that you've done some special things to bring awareness to people. Stephanie, what are some of the things that you're doing this month?
Well, at 1 o'clock, we're having a free movie event. Rebekah and I will be there. It's Migration.
Yes.
That's the movie?
Yes. It's at the Fox Theater.
Okay.
So Child Welfare and CASA and KinConnect are supporting everyone coming in. We're getting a free movie event as well as a free popcorn and a little drink. Otherwise, we're just trying to spread the word, trying to get that number out there.
So today is today. So
Today.
Everybody's welcome to go to the movies today, or how do you?
Yes, it's a teacher work day, so all the kiddos are out of school. So we
Great.
thought, what better way to end spring break than to have the free movie event? And yes, it is open for all ages. Everyone come.
Okay, well, I don't know that movie. Is it funny? Is it good?
It's cute. It's
cute.
very cute.
Okay, it's cute. Okay, cute movie. 1 o'clock today at Fox Theater. You also, I think, wrapped a vehicle at one point, didn't you? One of the sheriff's vehicles.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Oh, we got to wrap that vehicle last year during this, and our sheriff is amazing and let us keep it wrapped all year. But it's one of the school resource officers for the sheriff's department.
And you all don't do this alone. I mean, when you come together to protect kids, there's a whole team of people. Like the Dolphin House helps out. Is there an event at the Dolphin House that's going on right now? What is that about?
Yes, so there's a 5K event right now happening at the Dolphin House, and we're supporting that.
Is that the one that you don't have to run, actually?
Yeah, we don't actually have to run, which is why I signed
I
up.
love that.
So we've been supporting that or sponsoring it for the last couple of years, ever since they started doing it virtually. And we'll keep supporting that. The Dolphin House plays a huge part in the safety of children.
They do indeed, and they do such a nice job. And I think that helping kids who've been through trauma from a sexual assault, really they make it as seamless as possible for those kids. So it's really great. And I think that that's one thing that I appreciate is all the agencies come together to help that kid. And there may be 2 or 3 agencies involved in the one kid, and they kind of cross over. So hopefully that it works to the advantage for the kid when we all work together for that reason. So
yeah, I think it does. There's great community partners in this Montrose area.
Yeah, this is really heart work. I mean, this is work that not everybody can do. I know it's hard to find caseworkers sometimes, and I know that we're even down a few at this point. But it's hard work, and the qualifications to be a caseworker for child welfare is difficult too. And I hope that we continue to get the kind of people that we need to get in there, because you have to have a huge capacity to love and to want to do the right thing for those kids. So I hope this has helped for foster. I hope people think, well, maybe I'll consider that. So I hope you get some calls for that. But, I wanted to touch on, there seems like there's always some myths regarding, children abuse. Okay, I guess we've already got Mythbuster up there. So we're going to go. There's some myths that surround child safety, child welfare. And so, Stephanie, the myth number 1,
Yes.
only strangers, no?
No. In fact, child welfare only investigates intrafamilial. So all of our cases with the exception of if it's a sexual assault where the perpetrator's under the age of 10, we would be investigating those as well. But for all of our cases are family, and that could be a significant other that's in the house. I mean, we really have to look at, family can be a little bit broad, but if they're in the house and there's a significant relationship.
Right. Okay, and what myth number 2 is? Children always tell someone if they're being abused?
No, children, they do disclose. Something will usually come out. That's why it's important to make that call if you hear anything or have a suspicion. But for the most part, kids are not going to report on a loved one that is hurting them or neglecting them.
Mm-hmm. So doesn't that make it difficult? I mean, so what happens in schools then? Teachers have to look for symptoms that they think might be indicative of abuse. Makes it difficult, right? And I can see why kids wouldn't want to disclose because they want to protect those parents, which kind of underlies that whole family is so important for children, and even if they're getting hurt. So that's myth number 2. And then child abuse only happens in poor families. Not so.
True.
Not true at all.
Yeah.
Nope.
It does not know economic or social restraints. It can happen anytime, anywhere.
So have you two been shocked at some of the families that have come in and across your desk, things that have happened, and to substantiate that myth?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Over the last 15 years, yes.
Yeah. And then the number 4, physical abuse is the only form of child abuse. So what other kinds of child abuse are there?
Our highest cases involve neglect, and that could be lack of hygiene in the home, lack of clean clothes, lack of food. And it's really important to understand that poverty does not equal child abuse. So just because someone doesn't have a lot of clothes in their closet or doesn't have a lot of food or may not have organic food, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about those that are malnourished because there's not enough food in the house. It can also be medical neglect, not going to the doctor, not going to the dentist. We've seen a lot of those cases where a tooth could get infected, and that's so close to the brain, we have to show that there's a medical risk. Emotional abuse, which is could be anything from being yelled at, and not just the joke, my windows are going to be open this summer, so if you hear me yelling at my kids, just know I asked nicely. It's more than that. It's the degrading and the to the point where the child's fearful for their own safety.
Right.
Physical abuse is definitely on there. Sexual abuse, which is often hidden abuse.
So, I mean, do most of your kids do suffer from emotional abuse? Several of the kinds. It's not just one or the other, right? I mean, wouldn't they also be have some emotional abuse too, along with physical? I mean, I don't know how you would separate that so much.
That's the hard part, is tying emotional abuse to what would be the neglect. But yes, I would say any kind of abuse is going to have a trauma response, and our job is to try to help with that trauma. Right.
And so, when you work with your foster families, do they go through training so they understand all of this, and
yes.
so it's a kin, so it's a grandparent or someone that knows the child well. They go through training within the home, or they?
So we do all of our training through the state of Colorado. So fortunately, most of our grandparents and traditional foster homes, they can do their training online and then through Zoom classes and web-based classes. But then after they do that training, we provide in-home support through our case management as well.
Okay. So and that probably includes parental, help, how to parent. I don't know. I always felt like
some
we
of
should
it
have
is,
that.
yes, especially when you have grandparents who are, used to parenting in, say, they were raising kids in the 60s or
You're
70s.
going to say old school, aren't you?
Yeah, I want
My
to,
age.
but it's
Yeah.
I'm right there with you. And, they have a very different idea about how that should look. And child welfare immediately, when a child comes in, it doesn't matter where that child's placed, there's Absolutely no type of physical touch at all that involves spanking or anything like that. So you cannot place a child in a grandparent's home, and grandparents, immediately cannot be like, well, I'm just going to spank them. That's not how it works anymore.
Okay.
So we have to have a lot of training around how do you parent this child now, a child with trauma. It's not just your grandchild, but it's a child with trauma.
So you can discipline, but it's not.
Yes.
Okay.
But it cannot be physical.
Okay.
And so, and we don't want it to be emotional either. And so there's just a lot of emotions already within a kinship family. So we offer a lot of support around that too, because not only have they essentially may have lost their own son or daughter through this situation, or have hard feelings, on what's going on and within the family at that time. We want to support them through that, but also try to make sure that they continue to be a support for not only the grandchild, but their son or daughter. I mean, can you imagine?
There's a lot going on. I mean,
it's
you could
huge.
be resentment and anger because, maybe this wasn't what you thought you were going to be doing at this time in your life.
Lots of people have retired.
Yeah. And all of a sudden now you're taken care of and you love that grandson or granddaughter or whatever, but, it is still a challenge. So you're able to offer those kind of support services, and you talked about the wraparound services, which I think is just a nice term of saying whatever somebody might need, you're able to supply that for them. So, and then there's one more. Reporting suspected child abuse is a big deal. Talk about the reporting process, Stephanie, if you would.
Absolutely. It's anonymous unless you're a mandated reporter, and then those, because you also get the letter back showing if the referral was accepted or not. But I just want to alleviate a lot of concerns and a lot of myths around that, is that I have to be involved, I have to know everything, I'm going to have follow-up, all of those scary things that do make it hard to call. It's not. You don't have to know all the information. You don't even have to be right. I know a lot of people say, well, I just don't know for sure. It doesn't matter. And making that call is so important, as you might have that one little piece of information that we need to fill the puzzle pieces in. It's a phone call. They'll ask you questions. Again, if you're not a mandated reporter, you can do this anonymously. We've had people at the grocery store call and say, I didn't really see much, but this is what I saw, and this is the car they got into. And with our, co-working with law enforcement, sometimes that's how we find the information that we need. So it's easy to call in the grand scheme of things, but I know emotionally it's hard for people to call because they don't want to cause trouble in a family.
That's true, but I want people to feel that they are part of the puzzle, and that is an important piece to it. That it's not you're not going to be in trouble. You don't get marked as calling, but you could be helping a situation. And the other thing to note is that call could end up in, after you do look into it, that it wasn't actionable. I mean, so sometimes you're concerned, but it doesn't turn out that it's the kid is taken from the home or something like that. So I think it's important for people to know that, getting involved, be engaged, and if you see something, I think it's really important to at least voice that opinion. So how would people know who to call? I mean, 911?
They can, absolutely. Law enforcement is always ready to respond to any concern, and we work cooperatively with them. We have a great working relationship with our SO and our PD here in town. You can always call the hotline, this 1-844-CO4-KIDS. It's answered 24/7. So it's a call center that's going to be able to take that information, and that information will come on down to Montrose County.
So would I have to remember that whole, 844-CO4-KIDS?
Yes.
Number 4 kids. Okay. And that was on our website so people could find it if they needed to?
Yes.
Okay. And help me understand the pinwheels, because every year we bring the pinwheels out and we put them all over the place. And tell me about that.
It's a symbol of joy of childhood. And so they have just adopted it for child abuse awareness and as a symbol of being free and not scared, I guess you could say.
Yeah. We're about to close. I just want to say that I hope that we do get some interest for your program. I think that would be really great if we had a team of grandmothers step up and say, I'm willing, or an aunt that would be willing to do that. But even for traditional foster care, I think we need to maybe help people understand that it's not as difficult as it's a process, but not as difficult as people think. And that there really is a need for kids.
There is.
But why, just as we close, why the two of you, you've been 15 years, so you don't do this because it's the paycheck. You do it for another reason. Why do you two do, and you're both close to crying, so you're going to make me cry, so don't do it. We haven't had that yet on County Talk, but why do you do it? Rebekah?
That is tough because it is hard. And we are in a huge pendulum swing right now, which is pulled away from the importance of the child's voice, and that's scary. Mm-hmm. 15 years ago, we were very much about the child's voice, and that's what kept me in child welfare. And now we're seeing this shift, and I'm still not going to leave because I still believe in the,
Right.
the process and what's best for children. It's just harder now. It's harder to witness.
Don't you think people would be surprised to hear that the child's voice is just through, and this is through legislation and lobbyists, and maybe even a specific group having a particular interest in this topic, but that it's moving away from kids having a say?
Yeah.
And you think we should swing back to where kids' voices are being heard?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I would like to see happen, and so I'll stick around for that.
Right.
'Cause our children are our future.
Mm-hmm.
So
They are. Well, thank you for doing what you do, Stephanie.
I love what I do. I love this work. Not a lot of people can do it because it is hard, and there are sleepless nights. This was a hard weekend for me specifically, and I was exhausted. But I was back at the office by 7:30 this morning making phone calls. And I have an amazing team. Mm-hmm. I want to be there to be able to support the team that we have at Montrose County and to work with the school district and Hilltop and CASA and CPAs and all the therapists that we have in town. I feel I get a lot of joy, and it just makes me feel good to be able to coordinate and work with our community partners, even when it feels like we're failing.
A little bit rough, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. But it's got to be rewarding to know that you're, in some cases, able to put families back together again, because I know there are some success stories. I wish the drugs weren't as prominent, because I think that does get in the way of clear-minded reunification kind of things. But I admire what you two do, and I don't know that I could do it, and I appreciate that you do it for the county. So thank you for joining us for County Talk. I hope everybody learned a little bit about child welfare. If you have any questions, you're welcome to call the county anytime, so we can explain it to you. It is serious business, but it is about the kids and families and helping. So call Rebekah when you clean up your house and you're ready to sign up for being a foster mom. We need you, and
that's right.
And we'll thank you for joining us on this. It was not boring, but very important. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.